Welcome back to the CRE with CBC Worldwide podcast. Here we explore the trends, the ideas, and the innovations shaping the future of commercial real estate. I'm your host, Dan Spiegel, Senior Vice President and Managing Director of the Coldwell Banker Commercial Network. We're recording this conversation in, it's mid-October, but believe it or not, that's already heading into the holiday season. And we're here today to talk about the holiday season with James Cook, America's Director of Research of Retail for JLL. James and I happened to go ways back. We just determined it was like 12 years ago or something like that, where we did work together at another firm. But since then, James has evolved into a guru of everything retail and commercial real estate. So I really look forward to talking to him as we enter into this holiday season, and we can talk about, what's going to be hot, what's not, what to think about when it comes to both locations as well as investing in retail real estate. I've also watched James evolve from a researcher. We both started in the research world of commercial real estate into different things. So that's super cool and excited to explore that element of his career. But we'll really talk about the state of retail real estate today, what consumer behavior and trends are shaping the future of the industry, and how, whether you're a broker, investor, or developer, or just curious about where retail is headed, because it's always evolving, this is the episode for you. So let's dive in. James, welcome to the CRE with CBC Worldwide podcast.
Dan, it's so awesome to be here. And we're picking it up right where we left off 12-ish years ago. So it's great to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here with you as well. So James, let's just start. Just give us a little bit about what you do now, and then in a moment we'll go into your background. But just tell us, what is your role, and how is it that you focus on things real estate, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so my role is retail research at JLL for North America. So it's a big geographic area. I cover US and Canada, or my team and I do. And we cover all trends in retail real estate in both of those countries. So our biggest baseline thing we do is we write a lot of reports. So
Right.
market reports and trend reports, and hey, what's up with grocery anchored centers? What's up with luxury retail? So we do a lot of those. And then the outgrowth of that, all that research, is that we do podcasts about that stuff. I do videos, and I speak at events and talk to our clients about all of these different trends and how they impact the real estate that they own or lease.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we do some of the same, but frankly, our market coverage is very different. Coldwell Banker Commercial is in mostly secondary and tertiary markets across the US, whereas JLL is in a lot of the big cities. And that's cool because that gives some different perspective. I know you personally live in one of those secondary or tertiary markets, so I guess you have some personal experience as well. But why don't we just start with you personally and just tell us, how did you evolve? I'm trying to remember, your original life was in GIS, I think. And how did you
It's
evolve
true.
eventually into this space? Just to give us a little commercial real estate career advice here.
I think it all goes back to before I even got into the business. For me, it's all about storytelling. Like when I was in college, I had a degree in English literature criticism, something like that, English literature. So it was always about stories for me. And so when I got into the business, it was because I was writing a lot of, I was hired to write market reports. And it's always like, what's the story? Be it a building on an intersection or an entire market. Um, and kind of as I moved along, as you said, I was doing GIS and mapping for a while, and that's about storytelling too. And when I came to JLL, I was brought on to build out this retail research platform. And so we start telling the stories in reports. And then you might be shocked to learn that most people do not read written reports these days.
Yep.
So I was like, how can we get the word out on all this work we're doing? So we started a podcast called Where We Buy, and which is great, but people don't always listen to podcasts. So we started doing little video snippets. I'm posting them on all the different social medias. And just through all of that, it's just all an outgrowth of storytelling, but it's all these different venues to tell kind of the story of retail real estate.
That's super cool that you just said that, as I think about it, because a lot of what commercial real estate professionals do is storytelling,
Yeah.
right? So that's a great point. And frankly, I know at conferences we've done it, and I'm sure you have as well, is try to coach people on storytelling, because when you're trying to pitch a particular owner on selling an asset or developing a piece of land or whatever, you're telling a story, right? And so that's a lot of what we do. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a fiction, right? It's got to be based on the facts of the situation, but a lot of it's convincing either that potential client or the existing prospect to buy a piece of land or redevelop a center what the potential is. So that's super cool, and I appreciate you sharing that evolution because I do get a question, James, you probably do too, but every now and then I'll talk to younger, when I say younger, like people coming right out of college about getting into commercial real estate, and I always say there's just so many things you can do. Like it can go so many different directions. So
Yeah.
be open minded. And you're just a great example, by the way, of someone who's just gone a variety of directions, but you did have a thread of storytelling, which is cool. I appreciate that. All right, so let's get into the topic of retail, since you know all things retail. And why don't you just why don't start high level? Just give us a little sense of I'll call it the retail market. I mean, I guess we can talk about let's start by talking about the user perspective, the retailer or not the investor. And maybe what you're seeing. I mean, I feel like I hear reports, consumer spending's up, consumer spending's down, the high end consumer's up. I don't know. Maybe you can help me understand a little bit about where the market or where the consumer behavior is today.
Yeah, so it's doing a couple of different things. I think all the answer to all those is yes. From the consumer perspective, so you've got folks in the upper income where spending is really growing right now, and then folks lower income families that have really been hit by inflation's kind of under control now, but just you know since 2019, just really 20 forget the number 22, 23% inflation increase in CPI, which really hits you when you're trying to shop on a budget. So, from a retailer standpoint, what that means right now is the retailers that are doing the best are the ones that are offering value.
Interesting.
So, that could be in groceries, that could be like an Aldi or Walmart too. Anybody who's shopping for clothing, maybe they're looking for a value. So, you got like TJ Maxx, Ross Dress for Less. All those guys are expanding, opening new locations, doing many of them are doing better than expected. Um, and then the other big thing that's expanding right now and opening new locations is fast food, like quick service restaurants,
Okay.
fast casual. So people are saying, "Well, I'm not gonna go to maybe a sit down restaurant, but we'll get some Chick-fil-A or something like that." Um, so that's kind of the part of the story. Those are who's expanding, opening new stores. But then there's this whole other story, which is we haven't built significant numbers of new shopping centers since like 2009, which was a long time ago now. And that means that there's very little vacant retail space. So you've got still a number of expanding chains all fighting over very limited space. Like our vacancy rate is 4.0. Shoot, we're working on our new numbers. Let's say it's 4.3%, but it's below
Okay.
5%. That's
Right.
so low. There's like nothing out there.
Yeah, I have heard from our markets as well that if it's a well-located center, the space
Yeah,
is gone. It's done.
yeah,
It's
right
gone.
away. Yeah,
Right, it's right away. There's no space, right? So that is super interesting that that's the case. And it's interesting also you said about value, right? I guess that kind of makes sense, which, I just reflect on, it seems like there was a time when some of those value, like you mentioned TJ Maxx, like, they were starting to struggle a little bit, right, in the market, but now the market has shifted in a different direction. So, which is part of what a commercial real estate broker does is try to help that company, make sure they're located to capture the client and the consumer where the market is today, right? That might
yeah.
change over time. Absolutely. So value, I think you're pointing to value where it's out. It sounds like high end is also there, although it seems like the high end department stores, maybe like all department stores are struggling. But I suppose there was some high street stuff that's still doing well. Is that fair?
Well, so luxury, I think overall the luxury consumer is still spending, but what happened kind of like mid lockdown pandemic is people had a little bit extra spending money. And so you had a lot of middle class people buying aspirational luxury items. So a lot of the luxury conglomerates were doing especially well a few years ago, and they're opening new locations. And so you had like a period where there were a lot of new luxury stores that were opening in malls, like Class A malls, like have a Gucci store or something like that. and expanded. And now a lot of those conglomerates, like LVMH and Kering, they're not seeing the kind of growth that they were a few years ago. Because the wealthy are still spending, but it's the middle class aren't really spending on luxury. So most of those, not all of them, but a lot of them have seen declining revenues in the past year.
That's interesting. The only place I have to say where I see just excess of luxury retailers is Las Vegas. And I know
Oh
you
my
probably go to a
gosh.
lot of I feel like every one of those hotels has like 3 Guccis or something. I'm probably wrong there, but it feels like that. And I know that's part of the aura of what they're trying to create when you're there.
Yeah.
But that is the only place where I see just consistent occupancy of luxury retailers. Is that fair? Is that pretty
It's the highest
accurate?
density of individual, if you looked on a map, you're like, "Why are there multiple like Gucci stores like
Right.
seemingly across the street from each other?" What's also interesting, and this is Las Vegas is like no other market in the world that I
Sure.
know of. What else is interesting is you'll have strips of luxury in the hotels, or like the Crystals is a luxury mall, and you'll be like, "Boy, it's pretty quiet around here. Are they doing okay?" But they just need one ultra wealthy person to come in and make one purchase, and they've made their week. So
Wow.
they don't need that kind of foot traffic that most retail needs. That's why luxury often feels those luxury stores or the luxury wings of malls feel pretty low key. It's because they don't need kind of the high foot traffic.
Right, right, that makes sense. Their price point's a little bit higher, maybe the profit margin per item is a little bit higher, and
Yeah.
therefore they can just sell, 1 or 2 goods. You mentioned QSRs, I'm gonna kinda it's a little bit of a tangent as the coffee business, right? I know I've read a lot about Starbucks retrenching. They here in Chicago, I want to say they closed 10 stores, which really for Starbucks is like nothing. Right, I mean, they've got so many crazy locations, but, I know it's not I don't think that qualifies as a QSR per se, but, is it but, I at the same time, like, some of our franchisees in Texas, particularly in, Waco and Lubbock, have, like, is it 7 Brew? Is that what it's called? 7
Seven
Brew?
Brew, you
7
got
but there are a whole bunch of them that are, like,
Dutch
expanding like crazy.
Brothers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dutch Brothers, exactly. Those are expanding like crazy, right?
Yeah,
So, what's going
it's
on in that coffee thing? I'm a big coffee fan, but I mean, I'm just curious. And I guess every company needs to retrench at some point.
Yeah, I mean, well, so overall, you've got the beverage segment, which
Okay.
is still growing, and a lot of that is fueled by younger consumers who are often driven by social media posting, and that's not about coffee. That's about smoothies and bobas and sweet drinks. So I would say the coffee segment isn't growing as much as the beverage segment is growing. So,
Mhm.
like, a lot of those Dutch Brothers, like, I see that and think, "Oh, that's where I would get coffee," but their real growth is in, like, they're not smoothies, but you know what I mean, like, the
Yeah.
colorful drinks that
They're
the
sweet too.
kids are all
They're
drinking.
like I think of them as coffee milkshakes, but anyway,
Yeah,
they're something like that.
which is I'm very boring, I'm like a black coffee person. But, that
Ditto.
whole segment is growing. Starbucks, they're still, closed just a negligible number of stores, and they're
Right.
just kind of retrenching their strategy and focusing back on what they started with, which was the third place idea, which I like because I will go and hang out at a Starbucks and work, and they're now doing, the drinks in the glass again, in the glass mugs if you're gonna sit in there, and kind of just a refocus on the atmosphere and kinda going back to what, Starbucks originally was.
Yeah, I think consumer trends do vary, so they have to they have to try different things that meet the moment. And I hear you on the boba tea. I actually was in California 2 weeks ago with, our kids. Our son is in his late 20s, and they were like, "Oh, boba tea. We gotta get some boba tea." And I'm like, "I don't get it. Like, I don't get it." But I guess that's, I didn't think about the social media aspect of marketing that drives traffic to places like that. That's a super interesting idea. Super interesting
And
idea.
and and the whole beverage segment, like I said, it's so far beyond coffee. Like, have you heard of the chain Swig? Uh,
I have not.
so
Go ahead, tell me about it.
it's a beverage chain out of Utah, and they sell something that you may or may not have heard of called dirty sodas. So the first time I heard of it, I thought, "Oh, that's sodas with alcohol in it," but it's not.
It's
It's
Utah.
it's like right, it's Utah. So it's what I would have as a kid called suicides, where you would put you probably didn't have this, but, like, you would go to and you would hit and put all the sodas in one drink, root beer, Dr. Pepper, Sprite, all in one drink. We would call those suicides when I was a kid. I don't know if that was like a Pennsylvania thing where I grew up. But anyway, so it's a mixture, it's a dirty soda. So it's a mixture of different sodas together. And then they also put cream in it. And that's a thing
Wow.
that people drink, which doesn't sound, I'm not the target demographic, but they're
Right.
colorful, they look interesting. You can have lots of different mixtures and flavors, and so, that's a growing segment now, the dirty soda
Wow.
segment.
I learned about so much stuff in the world. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. I'm going to kind of stay a little bit on that coffee thing, but it made me think of one of the reasons I think Starbucks closed a store near me actually is just because it's a corner location with no real place to stop. I'm in the city, so understood. Uh, it made me think about how is drive-through still really important during the pandemic? Drive-through was everything. 3 lanes of drive-through, all that kind of stuff for Chick-fil-A and whatever else. So is drive-through for, I guess, QSRs in particular, maybe for coffee as well. Is that still a super important factor, or is that kind of tempered a little bit since we're now, what, 5 years out of the pandemic, or at least from the start of it?
Yeah. Oh, it's funny, like, yeah, during the pandemic, you'd see these concepts with, like, 3, 4 lanes wide. You don't see as much of that, but the primacy of the drive-through, I mean, when you're talking about beverages, no doubt about it, you have to have a drive-through. You just absolutely have to. And also too, most QSR, like if you're selling breakfast sandwiches, people are stopping on their way to work, you really do have to have a drive-through. I think yeah, I can't think of many quick service concepts that will forego the drive-through unless it's absolutely in a very urban, high foot traffic location. That's the only example I could think of.
Yeah. So, since you hit on that, speaking of urban locations, is there any certain trend that you see very distinct between urban? I know urban's obviously having its challenges because of lack of office workday population. Although I hear leasing in San Francisco, New York is hitting records this year, so that should be. But what is the key difference you see today between the urban and the suburban, if you will, retail location requirements?
I mean, urban, like, just as far as demand, suburban is still stronger, and it's been stronger since the pandemic. Everything suddenly became focused about around suburban. We have, like, a lot of that daytime population has come back to the cities. So I would say we've seen a pretty good recovery of urban retail. What we haven't seen is like the 5-day-a-week office worker. So
Right.
basically market rents just to have to adjust for that. Like, you're just not going to do the same volume as a restaurant, so rents have to adjust for that. The other thing too is we're like, if you think about tourism, that often drives city retail, and the domestic tourists are back, but the international tourists are not back.
Yeah.
And especially from places like Asia, and also Canada is a big one too, big drop in Canadian tourism. And so the retailers that are selling to tourists kind of have to reevaluate their expectations. A lot of time that's the luxury retailers too, so maybe it's a little bit softer there. But overall, I feel good, like, most of we track what we call the prime urban corridors, and those would be like Michigan Avenue, Rodeo Drive, Fifth Avenue. Most of them are doing exceptionally well. Um, Michigan Avenue in Chicago is a little bit soft, but I mean, we just had the Harry Potter open. I'm trying to think of what else happened. You had that vacant, Under Armour on Michigan Avenue that, oh shoot, who leased it up? I'm blanking, but Uniqlo leased it up. So you've got people coming back on Michigan Avenue. But in general, yeah, like that tourist-focused experiential retail seems to be doing okay.
How about, just because I am in Chicago, but how about the retailer that was, like, online that went in store? So I'm thinking of, I don't know, some of the shoe brands, and I can't think of brands, you probably can off the top of your head. Are those still a thing, and are they locating like, that
Oh,
was in
yeah.
the Chicago context, that was locating in, I'll call it Fulton Market, which is more of the Chicago tech area, right? Younger demographic, perhaps. But whatever that online to in-store, is that still a thing, and where are they locating?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, like, an example of that would be Allbirds,
Yep,
the
Allbirds,
shoe brand.
Vuori, things like
Yeah,
that, yeah.
they're that's still super hot. And the way it works is you kind of start a new cool brand, and you start by selling online. Oftentimes it's like celebrity backed, to help marketing and all that. So it'll be associated with like a Kardashian or something like that. But there is a certain point where you cannot grow market share anymore just selling online. And then so a brand will say, okay, well, we'll open up like a store in Soho in New York, or we'll open up a store in on Melrose in Los Angeles to kind of generate some buzz. And that helps grow the brand to the next level. But then the next level after that is they just have to start opening up across America. And then they're on regular high street locations, and then they go into class A malls. Like, I think the best example of that is Warby Parker, which was totally selling glasses online. And they have so many brick and mortar locations now. They've discontinued. They used to mail you glasses to your home that you would try on, and that was their whole
Right.
gig. They've
Yeah.
discontinued that because all their money's coming from brick and mortar sales now.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh, that is so interesting. I did think of them. I think my daughter had bought glasses from them, and yeah, it was all about trying them on. And the virtual thing's okay. It's not great at trying to figure out what glasses look like, but wow, that's cool. Speaking of another concept, how about booksellers? Is it with Barnes and Noble? Is that the one that's back?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like the one.
yeah, that's the one that's back. Not although
So
Amazon has some stores too, right?
they did. They've closed those.
They've
Yeah.
closed them. Okay.
We are, I mean, it's not quite a bookseller golden age, but Barnes and Noble's definitely back. Like
Yeah.
people, it's recognized as an amenity to the certain type of shopping center that's oriented towards like lifestyle. Um, it's not just a place to go buy books, but it's a place to hang out. They usually have a coffee component, food component, and then like a lot of gifts and pop culture stuff and music. And, you know, it's crazy. Like vinyl records are back. So people will buy those there. There's a lot of retro stuff. And then there's a couple of like um, discount chains like Half Price Books and Books a Million that are also doing well as well. So, I mean, I remember back in the day when we were at peak bookstore, when you would have like a Borders that was like the anchor of a shopping center, and it was so huge and multi-story, and that came crashing down, and we're not back to that, but we're back to a point where, Barnes& and Noble's opening a significant number of new stores, which is kind of surprising to hear.
I think it's kinda cool because I do think it's a little bit of I wanna touch and feel the product, kinda like
Yep.
clothing sometimes. It's
Yep.
like, sometimes you get tired of buying things online and trying them and returning them, and a book is something where, yeah, I'm not sure what I wanna read, I wanna browse a couple things, and there is something special about holding a book and flipping through it, not to mention, as you said, a bunch of other stuff that's going on there. So that's interesting, and I guess for any aspiring retailers out there, just know you gotta watch the market, right? Because it's gonna evolve, and you gotta stay on top of it. And I've seen so many retailers come and go, but it's cool to see
Oh
them
my
kind
gosh,
of
I know.
go and come back. That's super cool. I love that. I love that. You mentioned other things to do in a Barnes& and Noble, and I wanna kinda segue into kind of experiential retail. That's been a term, gosh, it's been around for, I wanna say, at least 10 years, maybe? I don't know, something like that, right? I don't know.
At least, yeah,
At least, yeah.
yeah.
So, I don't know, I'm not sure always what that means, and I'm sure it has meant different things as years move on, right? It means different things, but what does it mean today? And can you give us some examples of maybe some hot experiential concepts that you've seen or experienced or you see coming, forth soon?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so like most retail is daily needs. It is, I gotta go get cat litter, I gotta go get milk. But there is that certain seasoning that gets sprinkled on top of retail, and that's the experiential retail. And you're most likely to see that in Class A malls. And I don't want to get too deep into malls, but there's a lot of bad malls out there. But the ones that are doing well, the Class A malls, are doing really well. And that's where you're going to find some of the best retail in the US. And that's often where you're going to find experiential retail. The other place you'll find it is like the prime urban corridors. And there's lots of cool stuff going on. I don't know. Are you familiar with Netflix House? Have you heard about
I
this?
have not heard about it. Tell me more.
Okay. Well, Netflix has entered the physical world. They've been doing for about 5 years, they've been doing, like, these ticketed experiences, like, you could go to the Stranger Things walkthrough experience, and they've been doing retail pop-ups, and they've been doing restaurant pop-ups. And so now they're like, let's put all that under one roof. So they've got 2 locations and now no, I'm sorry, 3 now. Philly, uh, Dallas. It's either Dallas or Houston, and then Las Vegas on the Strip. But the other 2, the Texas and the Philly ones, are in former department stores, so they're really big.
Wow.
And you're gonna have the first one opens, I think, next month at King of Prussia in Philly. And so you'll have there's a themed mini golf, there's a restaurant, there's an auditorium where you could see a screening of your favorite Netflix movie, or maybe they do a premiere. There's ticketed experiences around Stranger Things, Squid Games, there's an arcade. So it's all this Netflix stuff. Um, and so there's 3 announced. They could do I've heard them say they could do as many as 50, not just in the US, but like around the world.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting thing. And what's cool about it too is they're Netflix, so they own their IP. So the next time they have a new hit show, they can, add in a new experience based on, whatever that is. So it's kind of rotating and always exciting and new.
That I James, I wanna talk to you all the time. That's just a fun concept. I had no idea that was out there. Maybe I'm not the demographic, so I don't know, but that's super cool.
Yeah.
Let me suggest one that's I think on the struggling side, which is like the, CVS, Walgreens, right? Both as corporate entities, they've struggled. I know, inventory control or theft control, they've had consumers are frustrated and they'd rather just order stuff online. I don't know, or maybe Target's eating the business for Walmart. What's going on in that segment?
Yeah, so, like, talking about drugstores,
Right.
like, there was a few years ago, especially a lot of news about crime. That really wasn't a major impact on their business. That was
Okay.
more just some select locations, high crime areas. Um, it's really there's a couple of things. One is, like, the pharmacy business, how they got reimbursed changed and the economics of that changed, so that was, like, a negative impact.
'Kay.
And then, a lot of debt. Carrying retailers carrying too much debt. Sometimes they're like the target of leverage buyouts, and, when that happens, they put the debt back on the business, and so they've got all this debt service. It just ended up being and the other thing too is for, like, at least a decade, you'd have a Walgreens open across the street from a CVS, and every intersection, no matter if it was even just a little small town, you had to have a drugstore in every corner. And so they just expanded way too much. And so that business isn't necessarily bad. It's just the individual operations had to reset. Um, so anyway, that's my little
That
thing.
makes
We're gonna
sense.
have fewer drugstores in the future, but it's not like they're going away.
Right, and I imagine there's some competition that came from Walmart, Costco, Target, both on the
Right.
drug and both the prescription and the incidental, sundries and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I think for a while, um, especially Walgreens was like, hey, we're not gonna be just a drugstore. We're gonna be and there were even in Chicago, there were some,
Yeah,
like,
groceries.
flagships,
Yeah.
where that was like, "We're gonna have a sushi bar in our Walgreens," and, people don't need a sushi bar in their drugstore.
No, that would not be the place. It's not the environment, let's put it that way.
Right.
It's not the environment. When I think of food, I don't think of necessarily high-end food at a drugstore, so, okay, interesting, and then I'm gonna hit on one other retailer just because 'cause we're on this topic, but how about Walmart? I think they were struggling for a while, but I feel like they're back. Both their e-commerce business as well as their physical store business, right? Is that right?
Walmart, is particularly well positioned for this moment.
Yeah, you're talking about
Uh,
value, right? So I figured
yeah.
they fit in that
It's
category.
all about value, and I forget a month or 2 ago, they restated their expectations, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna do better this year than we expected." Right now, if you're lower income, you have to shop on a budget, and Walmart, Dollar General, places like that are really where you have to shop. Aldi is the other big one. If you're, middle class income, you're feeling the pressure from all this kind of negative news about the economy and expectations. Consumer sentiment is down, so you're like, "Oh, I need to save money." So, you go to discount, mass merchandiser like a Target or a Walmart. So it's a good benefit, of the times.
Yeah. Absolutely. Wow, it's so interesting. There's so many interesting things. Tell me about let's talk about site selection a little bit. I mean, I know, I'm sure both our firms use a lot of data in assisting clients in site selection, but how has that really changed? I mean, so much of real estate, commercial real estate was on the developer side, it was like the developer goes on gut, right? Like, "Oh, I love this location. It's gonna be great," and they build, and then we'll lease it up. How has that really changed? 'Cause I think I see a change even in the secondary and tertiary markets, people getting a lot smarter about studying mobile demographics and things, but how have you really seen that evolve both from a developer side as well as perhaps a retailer side?
I think from a data perspective, the biggest difference now with, say, 10 years ago is the mobility data. So
Yeah.
there's a number of different vendors that sell it, but it's basically anonymized cell phone data where you can see estimates of literally how many people are at a site at any time of day and any time of year. So we're much more sophisticated about the numbers. It used to be when I started in the business, you just had these traffic counts that would sometimes only get updated every other year, some of them. And, it was really, if you wanted real traffic counts, you had to go out and do it yourself.
Oh,
The
yeah.
other thing on that mobility data is you can see where people come from, like what neighborhoods they come from, where they're going to, where they're cross shopping at. So there's like that's a big one. And then I think with this has been around for a while, but it's even more sophisticated now is predictive analytics. So not generative AI, but machine learning. So using these machine learning models to predict based on past sales. If I were, I'm a retailer, if I were to put a store at this one intersection, I'm going to forecast pretty accurately what my sales would be there. And so that helps out a lot. I think that's just more sophisticated than it used to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. But you brought up something I thought is interesting is that traffic count, which has been forever like just super useful for developers as well as retailers. But now what you're saying is it's not the traffic, it's what the what kind of consumers are that is driving. And I don't have the right
Yeah.
word is right to say it's not just that there's cars going by, but are they the buyers I want? Are they the consumers I want? Right. That's what it's about. And that's what makes that mobility data so interesting and valuable
Yeah.
because you can be a lot more targeted at the consumer and when both in terms of developing as well as doing a site selection project. Super cool. Let's see what else we did. We hit up. We didn't. We talked a little bit at the beginning about social media and in your just how you've pivoted personally, and we do the same thing. I've done the same. How is that? And I think you talked about it when it comes to beverages and so. But how else is social media? That social media influencing how retailers are locating how they're making decisions, how they're reaching customers. Tell me a little bit about what you think on that.
Yeah. I mean, social media marketing has really changed. Um, Especially with food and beverage. Like, I forget the statistic, but we just posted a video yesterday that, okay, well, I think it's about 58% of TikTok users, regular TikTok users, say they visited a restaurant because of a review they saw on TikTok. So
Wow.
and I'm assuming that is true for Instagram, maybe not as much for YouTube, but all of the visual social medias, people just suddenly everybody's got the power of being a reviewer, a video reviewer of a restaurant. And if you are going to a new restaurant and you're a social media user, you will look that restaurant up on your social media of choice, watch videos. And so unfortunately, for restaurants, I mean, it's good and bad. Like it's good because it's more marketing, but it's bad because your worst day, maybe somebody called in sick, yeah, and things aren't going well that day. Everybody's got a phone, and that could become a TikTok or an Instagram post. So it's more challenging. And the other thing too, which I think is negative, is that food and beverages are being designed to look good on social media and look interesting. Maybe, I don't know, you've seen like sparklers sticking out of things or like dry ice, so it's all smoking, and it looks cool, but there's not a focus on taste because that doesn't come across the same way. Um,
Right.
some of my favorite tasting food does not look that great in photos. But anyway, so yeah, I think the biggest impact has really been about food and beverage.
That's interesting. I don't I mean, I do look up reviews of restaurants, Google reviews, Yelp reviews, things like that, but I haven't thought and sometimes I'll follow a restaurant on Instagram or something after I've been there, but I haven't thought of but I do get why it does, and to your point, TikTok, that's amazing. 50% is an amazing number, that you might go there, so wow, that's interesting. Alright, let's just try to draw it to a close to some degree, but let's talk a little bit about Black Friday. How important is that? Black Friday, what do they call Monday? Cyber Monday, right?
Yep.
And anything you wanna share in terms of what you're thinking about for the holiday season that's gonna be a big hit, to someone who's either a consumer or to someone who's a real estate person that has to, hasn't leased out the Halloween store yet or whatever it might be.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little late in the game to be making your holiday plans as like a
Right.
shopping center manager or something like that. We just ran so we do an annual survey of holiday consumers. We actually do two of them. So we ran our first one, and every year we ask people how much you're going to spend on the holidays. And this year it's a little bit negative. We're seeing a 10% decrease in overall holiday spending. However, that is not a decrease in spending on gifts. So people are saying we're going to spend the same on gifts that we did last year, but we're going to decrease our other spending on things like holiday decor and food and beverage and things like that. Um, so slightly kind of a negative turn, which is totally in line with what consumer sentiment has been doing. So that makes sense. But I will say a part 2 to that is we also break our findings out by income, and then you see this real difference in incomes, like households over 150K of annual household income are gonna spend 26% more for the holidays this year. So they're doing fine. Whereas households with under 50K are going to spend almost 24% less. So think about that. Like the wealthy people are going to spend about as much more as as the not wealthy people are going to spend less. So it's a real bifurcation, just a bigger split than I've seen in a couple of years now.
Well, I guess the answer is we'll find out in a couple months when we see the retail results for in January, right?
Right, and then I didn't even talk about, like, the tariff impact and
Yeah.
supply chain stuff, and that's such a big question mark. I can't even begin to predict what that's gonna mean.
I think we just live through that day by day. Just
Yeah.
let it go, and it is what it is, and we'll all have to figure it out as we go. But James, thank you so much for being guest. First of all, it was nice to kind of spend time with you since
Yeah.
I haven't really spent time with you in gosh, over a decade. So I hope for our guests and our listeners, they've had a good time listening to us talk about retail, consumer behavior, and commercial real estate. That's what we've really covered today, as well as career. That's interesting. I learned a bunch of things today. I learned about the value consumer. I learned about decision making, where to eat to dinner on TikTok. I've learned about experiential retail, particularly in high end malls, right? Some super cool things. I've learned about that Netflix concept. So hopefully our listeners have learned from you as well. Again, thank you, James, so much for being a guest today. That's a wrap for this episode of CRE with CBC Worldwide. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For James, if people want to watch what you're doing, do they connect with you on social media? Is that the best way?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 plugs. One is follow James Cook, JLL, on LinkedIn. Post everything on LinkedIn. And then 2 is if you listen to podcasts like this one you're listening to right now, check out Where We Buy. It's on all of your favorite podcast apps.
That's fair enough. We all, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and in particular, I listen to a lot of commercial real estate podcasts. So all good, and there's nothing wrong with plugging one another. So James, thank you so much. Do follow him. He's, as I said, always got some really cool stuff that he's talking about. For more resources and about Coldwell Banker Commercial, check us out at cbcworldwide.com. Otherwise, have a great holiday season since this episode will air probably sometime in November. And we'll find out and think about how many of these just predictions and discussions we've had are what you experienced this year. Thanks for listening.